This is not a rapier, this is not a rapier, and this is also not a rapier. Greetings, traveler. I'm Snapjelly, and I like rapiers. I love rapiers. I like rapiers an awful lot. In fact, out of all swords that I practice with, I gotta say that I probably like rapier fencing the most. Now, rapiers have this kind of stereotype over them that they are girly or weak or flimsy or gay. I've heard people call them gay as in the derogatory term, of course. And in all honesty, I don't think those statements are really valid. In fact, I like rapier fencing as much as I do because I believe it's actually one of the most effective and deadly swords out there. So I'm just going to address some misconceptions about rapiers and, well, hope that I can change some of you guys' minds. So let's start. First off, there are a lot of misconceptions about rapiers because of the evolution of swords. All of those swords I showed you in the beginning are not rapiers, but they are evolutions of rapiers. So I'm sorry, stock photo of a beautiful girl with a rapier. You're wrong. That's an epee. So what are rapiers? Well, rapiers have this incredible hilt. That's for one. Now, and that's also one of the things that people probably get confused about a lot because there are also cup-hilted rapiers. And they already look an awful lot like modern fencing equipment. Although there are many more reasons why a rapier is nothing like modern fencing equipment. And one of those things is a car alarm. One of those things is the blade. Yes, because rapiers are not just thrusting weapons. They are primarily thrusting weapons. They are specialized on the thrust, but they are both cut and thrust weapons. They are sharp on the side. No, well, this one isn't sharp at all because I use this for practice. But as you can see by a type of cross-section and stuff, it's specialized on the thrust. You are supposed to primarily thrust with this. But if the situation portrays itself that you can cut effectively with it, then you should definitely do it. It's not going to do as much damage as an arming sword because, well, a rapier doesn't have much weight in the blade. Most of the weight is in the handle, and there's not much mass behind the blade as well, so this is most likely not going to chop off somebody's arm or decapitate somebody or something like that. But just think about how easy it is to cut yourself with a knife. You've most likely cut yourself with a knife before, right? That's the thing, knives don't have much mass behind their blades either, and they're very light as well. But if you slice somebody with a knife, you can do quite an awful lot of damage, and rapier is kind of the same thing. Rapier techniques are designed to be thrusting techniques, because thrusting is an awful lot deadlier than cutting is just in general, with any weapon really, because with thrusting you can quite easily reach somebody's internal organs, and those wounds are simply harder to heal. Still today, actually, so thrusting is very powerful compared to cutting, but if you can get a good cut in with a sword like this, then definitely do it, because if you manage to slice somebody's face up, that may not be a fatal wound, but it will probably still win you the fight. And likewise, slicing their arms or their hands or their knees or something like that, that could still be incredibly beneficial to you. So they are both cut and thrust weapons. That combined with the impressive amount of hand protection, yeah, these are pretty freaking dangerous things. Now, I gotta say though, to be fair, not all rapiers are cut and thrust weapons. You see, one of the earliest evolutions of the rapier is a sword that I showed you in the beginning. It's the small sword. And small swords are just for thrusting. They're not sharp on the sides, you can't cut with them whatsoever, but they are designed for dueling. Now the thing is, when the small sword was already invented, rapiers were still in use. And especially in Spain and Italy, somewhere around like the 18th century, I presume, there were some people who decided that that triangular cross-section that the small sword has was better than this cross-section that the rapier standard has. Because it is stiffer, and because the rapier is primarily for thrusting, there aren't really any cutting techniques that you can do with a rapier. It's all thrust, thrust, thrust. And as other types of swords became less used over time, most of sword fighting was just poking at each other, and some people decided that they didn't need the cutting that a rapier could essentially do at all. They would just go for the thrust, so they got themselves a triangular cross-section blade to make the blade stiffer, essentially, and make it even better for thrusting. But the majority of rapiers are cut and thrust weapons. You can definitely cut with them. Speaking of cutting, people also seem to believe that you can cut through them. That's something that I've seen. I didn't know about this misconception before, but I've seen it on the internet quite an awful lot. That people have the idea that because rapier blades are so thin that you can just slice through them with a longsword. It's ridiculous. Makes no sense. It's stupid. I think actually I've once seen a video of another sword YouTuber. I can't remember who it was, but actually trying this out. And well, what happened was nothing. You can't cut through a rapier. It's one piece of steel against another piece of steel. Why do people believe that you can slice through swords? Makes no sense. Why would one piece of steel be completely fine and another piece of steel just break? Makes no sense. There are modern tools that you can use to cut steel, but those tools are specifically designed to exert an awful lot of power. A swing from a sword, even a long sword, is not going to be enough to break through a rapier. You'll be absolutely fine. Makes no sense. Anyway, I'll see if I can find that video. I can't remember who it was, but I'll leave a link in the description below if I can find it. You can watch that, alright? Another wrong idea that people have about rapiers is that they are faster to use than any other sword. And, you know, I could get where it comes from, but that's not precisely true. Because, well, in all honesty, they're not. I mean, you can parry with a rapier just as fast as you can parry with an arming sword, or with an arming sword as fast as you can parry with a rapier. I've honestly never noticed really much of a difference in speed. I do, however, this is a bit of personal confirmation, right? I find it easier to feint with a rapier, meaning that you essentially trick your opponent in pretending you're going to hit somewhere but strike somebody else. So I find it very easy with a rapier to, for example, raise your rapier up high and then strike low, for example. You can do that with any sword really, but I find it particularly easy to do with a rapier. And maybe because they are thin like that and you point them forward all the time, people get confused a lot. That might also be the case. You know, they don't really know where you're going to come from, but in all honesty, I would dub that just a lack of skill. It's not really like rapiers are faster, and you could argue that they're even slower if you really lunge, that is. Because depending on what style you practice, of course, the style that I prefer to practice is the one by Ridolfo Capovero, an Italian master, and he leans back quite an awful lot. He leans back quite a lot. And as you lunge, you put an awful lot of force on your left leg in order to propel yourself forward. You have to move your entire body with just the force of your left leg. And likewise, with rapier fencing, you lunge an awful lot further than you do with modern fencing, for example. So as you lunge, as far as you lunge, you're doing a one-legged squat. You're putting a lot of weight on your right leg, your primary leg, and you have to push yourself back up and go back to a guard position, whatever one you prefer. So, yeah, it's not really faster. From this point of view, you could even argue that using an arming sword or a longsword is faster, because all you have to do with a swing of a longsword is just, you know, it's a little step. You keep your back straight. You don't move your legs apart all that much. It's just a little step. You don't have to move your body an awful lot. So it sounds to me like longsword fencing is even faster, but in all honesty, I've never really noticed a difference. It's about the same. Another thing is, I probably should have mentioned this first, before the last point, but it's the idea that rapiers are lighter than other swords. And again, that is not true. I mean, they are light, but other swords are light as well. The average weight of a rapier is 1 kilo, which is the same weight as an arming sword is on average. They're about the same weight. It's just the weight of a single-handed sword. Now, modern fencing equipment, however, is lighter, and small swords are also lighter than rapiers, with an average of half a kilo. This could have multiple reasons. I believe that in modern fencing, a foil is actually only allowed to be half a kilo at most. But I'm not sure about that though. And you know, small swords were again dueling weapons, so it's speed that counted, not necessarily protection. And well, the blades became lighter and lighter and lighter. But on a rapier, you needed that protection. You needed to protect yourself an awful lot. It's essentially the same as an arming sword. It's just a different shape, really. So they're not lighter than arming swords are. And I guess that this is also where some confusion comes in, because the small sword is an evolution of the rapier, and the foil is not an evolution really, but it's kind of a design used to practice small sword fencing with. So the small sword was made to be incredibly light compared to a rapier, although it was also shorter. And then the foil was made to, you know, be the practice version of the small sword, which then became a sport on its own, and well, was made even lighter and lighter and lighter because that was more beneficial. But rapiers didn't suffer from this. Rapiers had a specific weight when they were made, and they remained that weight all the way up until they were, not rapiers anymore and became different kinds of swords. So rapiers are not light. Another thing that I would argue against, and once more, this one is just my personal opinion, but people call rapiers easy to use, right? Because people have the idea that they're light, they're flimsy, they're girly. You don't need to be strong to wield a rapier, and that is actually that's incredibly wrong. In fact, wielding a longsword in terms of muscles is way easier than wielding a rapier. And likewise, even though arming swords are the same weight as rapiers, wielding an arming sword is easier than wielding a rapier. Because with rapiers, they're quite a little bit of odd movements, and they're by no means hard to do, but you really have to get used to them. And incidentally, that's one of the reasons why I like rapier fencing so much, because, I like a challenge. I like doing things that are difficult. So, for example, I lean back a lot. This puts an awful lot of strain on my left leg. As I lunge, I put an awful lot of strain on my right leg. You need to be able to do that comfortably, continuously, and likewise, you constantly extend your arm. Right? You're constantly holding it like this, and it's the same weight as an arming sword, so it's not that heavy, but you are constantly putting stress on your deltoids, and that's really something you have to get used to. You have to train your muscles in order to deal with constant stress if you want to practice rapier fencing. And that's something that you don't have with medieval swords, as a lot of guard positions are there to just make it easy on your muscles. Any stance that you can essentially presume there's some difference, but most of them either have the sword, in a resting position or downwards completely, just because those are easy. And with rapier fencing, that's not the case. You are constantly ready for action, and that essentially makes them harder to use. Now, you might think, if they're harder to use, then why would anybody use them? Well, quite simply, because they are incredibly deadly. As I've said before, thrusting is deadly. Thrusting, it works really well, and, these things are just effective. They are incredibly protective. They have these incredibly impressive hilts, and although these are not perfect, awful lot, actually it happens more than I like to admit, but it happens an awful lot that you get stabbed in between the guard somewhere, which is where the cup-hilted rapiers come in. They are more protective. But thrusting simply works. These are very powerful, very protective, very deadly weapons. And another thing that I want to say is that rapiers are incredibly long, right? And that's not necessarily a misconception, because most people know that rapiers are really long, but just to put in perspective how long they actually are, here's my longsword fader. I just found this out recently. Now, if I put my rapier and my longsword next to each other so that the guards are the same height, you can see that my longsword is just a teensy-weensy bit longer. Can you see that? It's the tiniest difference. And this is the Hanwei Practical Rapier. This is the 37-inch blade. They also come with 43-inch blades. So that would have made it an awful lot longer than my longsword. Not like modern fencing equipment or small swords, which are an awful lot shorter. So, what it comes down to, rapiers. They're not flimsy, they are not weak, they are not easy to use, they are incredibly long, they are incredibly powerful, they are incredibly deadly, and they are incredibly awesome. So, that was it. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. You are awesome. Well, you were also awesome. You were awesome to begin with, but you are especially awesome now. You would be even more awesome if you were subscribed though, because I can tell that you are not subscribed, and you've watched the entire video, so you might as well do it, right? Also, follow me on Twitter and Facebook.com/SnapJelly. Our links are in the description below, and thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys. Bye.